For decades, Robert Parish was known as the quiet one, but now the Celtics legend is revealing a more personal side of himself in a new memoir. Anthony Everett sat down with Parish to discuss his book, The Chief.
The Big Three is synonymous with the 1980s Celtics. Larry Bird was the trash-talking superstar, while Kevin McHale was his good-humored sidekick. Often taking a back seat to these larger-than-life teammates, Robert Parish. Now, for the first time, the Hall of Famer is telling his story in the aptly titled autobiography, The Chief.
When you were here in Boston, you were viewed as reserved, stoic.
How about that?
So stoic, Parish was nicknamed after the silent Native American chief in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. But as it turns out, the Celtics legend is personally complex, socially conscious, and at times comedic.
You've decided now to open up a little bit with the book. I guess I'm curious, why now?
Never been really a people person. You know, I've always been a loner to myself, so I've got better with that. Softer, you know, not as dismissive and distant.
Do you have any thoughts as to why you were that other way? Sort of standoffish and private and stay away from me?
My pops, he was a pops that you could never please. When I graduated from college, my mother, you know, hugged me, kissed me on the cheek, you know, I'm so proud of you, blah, blah. Then my father hugged me. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to do. He has never shown us, you know, affection like that.
Parish credits his longtime partner, Esther, with helping him emerge from his famously hard shell to show another side to those who followed his career.
The book, you know, gives my fans and my haters an inside look at who and what I am. And especially now, like I said, I'm better now because I was more intense when I was a baller.
In The Chief, Parish discusses his humble beginnings, from being the worst player on his junior high team to playing for the little-known Centenary College, as well as his emergence as a star, thanks to the legendary trade that landed him in green.
When I first got traded to the Celtics, two things I thought about. The perceived reputation that Boston had, and I told myself, I'm going to Boston and play with that overrated white boy. And I was wrong on both accounts. The social atmosphere here, the perception is far worse than the reality. Boston embraced me from day one.
What about that overrated white boy you came to play with?
Oh, I was way wrong on that one too. No question about that one. From day one, I was like, oops.
But the path for Parish wasn't always smooth. In 1987, he was involved in an altercation with his then wife, whom Parish says appeared at his hotel room unannounced, while the two were legally separated. In his book, Parish writes, quote, "I grabbed her arm and pushed her out across the hallway. Now I am fully willing to admit that an action like that is assault."
Why did you feel it was important to kind of talk about that in the book?
I would never condone a man putting his hands on a woman. That's not what I'm advocating. I don't support that. I should have stayed calm. That incident would never happen. But it did, and I learned from it.
Now, Parish carries himself with the wisdom of an elder as he observes a game and culture that has evolved immensely since his playing days.
You gave so much joy to so many people, that team, those Celtics, you yourself. Now that you have your book out, what do you hope people take away about the Robert Parish that maybe they didn't know back in the mid-'80s?
How about this, sense of humor? I think reading the book, I think they will come out that I do have a sense of humor, that I do smile, that I show my teeth and
What a great interview there with our Anthony Everett. From basketball now to baseball, a new book examines how America's pastime and politics collided in the 1970s. Segregation Games focuses on the connection between racial segregation in Boston schools and the racial controversies for the Boston Red Sox. The book was written by author and University of Rhode Island professor David Faflik. He joins us now this morning to talk about this. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
I'm excited to talk about this research that you've done here. I want you to first set the scene. Let's go from the beginning here, because much of the book focuses on the aftermath of the 1974 court ruling forcing Boston to address school segregation through redistricting and busing. So what was going on at the city at this time? What kind of tensions existed?
And things are really coming to a head kind of around the time of the baseball season. So it's in the summer of 1974 is when Judge Garrity very famously sort of offers his ruling in what's becoming known as the busing case. Right. So the Boston school system has until the fall to sort of roll out the busing plan. And so the Red Sox are in a pennant race at this time, and they're sort of collapsing towards the end. And suddenly the tension in the city is shifting to what's happening in the schools, because there's really a battleground developing there. So baseball seems secondary at that point.
Right, but at the same time, the Red Sox were confronting racial issues of their own, right? What does what was happening at Fenway reveal about the broader tensions in the city? Yeah,
I mean, so really the argument of the book is that we would sort of take it for granted that sports is part of popular culture. And sort of what I'm trying to suggest is that the politics of busing in the city at the time itself is being conducted as a kind of sport. And so in uncomfortable ways, I mean, in some of the obvious ways, it's sort of anti-busing protests taking on the quality of a kind of pep rally. And in a more sinister sense, sort of like groups of white people attacking African Americans with baseball bats. And so that's really sort of the crux of what's happening here, is that people are looking at the politics of busing and racial divisions within the city as a kind of opportunity to play a game. But that's the darkest side of it. There are more positive sides as well.
Well, I know this book took a lot of research, right? Talk about the process of doing this deep dive. You know, what did you uncover? Anything just surprised you as you were doing your research?
Yeah, one of the biggest surprises was looking at the pages of the Bay State Banner, the African American weekly newspaper in Boston. You would think, for example, in the 1975, when the Red Sox very famously have their World Series run facing the Cincinnati Reds, that the Boston Red Sox would be all over the pages of local publications. If you look in the Bay State Banner for 1975, for the whole year, you don't find one mention of the Red Sox. And so this is really a sort of reflection of a long-standing sort of gap between the African American community in Boston and the Red Sox as a franchise. I mean, if you go to Fenway on a typical night in the 1970s, you're not going to see very many African Americans there, and there was a reason for that.
And so it's not so much what you found, but what you didn't see.
Exactly.
That made you say, let me look at this.
And that's sort of like the tip of the iceberg, really, for thinking about busing in general. It's, even to this day, it's something that people are aware of but don't really want to talk about. You might want to say the same thing for the time when it was happening. It's obviously right there, but the Red Sox in particular, there's one player during the period who will actually come forward and sort of go on record and have an opinion about busing. It's the thing that everyone knows about, no one really wants to talk about.
But you did this thorough deep dive. Kind of break down your process in this. I mean, that's a lot to unpack, to uncover, a lot to, discover as you're going through all of this.
Yeah, so like I was mentioning, so it's looking through the pages of contemporary periodicals like the Bay State Banner, but also obviously the Boston Globe. That's sort of just the newspaper side of things. But you can do a deep dive, a very deep dive in the archives in and around Boston. Northeastern University has a Beyond Busing archive, some of which has been digitized, but there's a large sort of like paper trail there. Boston College has a large collection. Suffolk University has a large collection. So I spent many months over many years immersing myself in this archive, reading from the secondary sources as well, sort of larger sort of generalizations and overviews on busing, and sort of cobbling all that together over the course of several years.
Well, I know when we think of words like sport and game, we think of fun, playful behavior. But you have kind of a double meaning of those terms in your book.
Certainly. There are all sorts of playful behaviors. Like I was saying, some of them have a more sinister edge to them. But some of them, if you think about just busing proper, like what's happening once classrooms are being desegregated or even attempts being made to integrate them. You have people in places like South Boston High School trying to introduce progressive education, where like people will go into the communities of Roxbury, the traditional African American stronghold in the city, and sort of doing like excavation, archaeological work, and thinking about like what does racial difference mean historically within a community like that. And so like getting students on their feet, I can say, there's a playful sort of side to that, bringing a sense of fun into a classroom or even out into the community. That's the positive side. But like I'm saying, there's also things like a stuffed toy gorilla becoming the unofficial mascot of the Red Sox during the busing crisis of 1974. That could seem innocent enough, except within the context when you have people throwing bananas at school buses being pulled up to South Boston High School. So like monkeys, stuffed animals, baseball bats, all sort of take on a larger, not just symbolic meaning, but kind of practical value as well during this period.
Yeah, we showed some clips there, some clippings of what you're talking about there. I know there are some people, though, who will listen to this, watch this, and they'll say, you know, politics and sports should not mix. We've heard that before. What do you think about that? Do you think that's even possible to do?
I don't. I've actually written about this in other books, just this idea about trying to keep these things separate. And clearly they're going to intersect.
Yeah.
And people at the time, too, when I mentioned there was one Red Sox player who would go on the record in 1974 and talk about the busing crisis. It's the left-handed pitcher Bill Lee, who was, let's just say, not greeted very warmly by the press in Boston, no less. People from the Boston Globe sort of taking him to task for saying, just play your sport. Let other people worry about the politics of all this. And so even people in the media at the time were not necessarily receptive to that. I just don't think it's possible. And I think we've certainly seen in the last 5-6 years in the wake of Black Lives Matter that I don't even know if we're trying to anymore separate these things, and we certainly shouldn't be.
Absolutely. Well, David, we really appreciate the work that you've done, and we thank you so much for being here, shedding a light.
It's an honor to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for watching. CityLine is really about the stories that shape our communities. We want to hear yours. Share what's happening where you live at CityLine at WCVB.com. Be sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram, and have a wonderful afternoon.